Hi, everyone. Today we are going to be looking at another Indian rum from the collection. And of course, this is the McDowell's number one, which they call the Celebration. Now, this is made by United Spirits, which is mostly owned by Diageo in India right now. And we actually do find it every now and then in Canada. Now, I've made this comment before, but I'm going to just reiterate for a little while. Indian rums don't really have a very good reputation globally, right? Now, granted, Old Monk is known everywhere. McDowell's number one is supposed to be the number one selling rum in the world, beating out Bacardi, beating out Old Monk, and whatever else is out there. But the truth is that most of the time, the rum actually sells gangbusters pretty much only in India, where they've got, well, millions of people who are drinking spirits of all kinds. The problem with Indian rums, generally speaking, is that they tend to have a reputation for being kind of low class tipple. And there's a bit of snobbery involved in that because whiskeys, as they are in the West, are considered to be the creme de la creme, while rums are like the also rans of the spirits world. And they've always had that reputation of being kind of like low class hooch for the common people. In India, this is magnified by a number of different factors. For one thing, it's always kind of never aspired to a premium sort of cachet, as well as the fact that it's usually made in far too many cases that we actually have some information about, made from neutral alcohol to which they add spirits or spices or whatever else to make it kind of like flavorful, and then they just put it out the door, and you never actually told anything about it. For example, whether it's Old Monk or whether it's McDowell's or whether it's some of the other smaller brands out there really isn't any information on any of the websites on how they make it. So you never are actually sure what you're getting, whether it's a pot still, whether it's a column still, whether it's a blend, whether they've added anything to it, whether there's coloring to it, nothing. You just really have to take it as you get it. Now, Mohan Meakin with their Old Monk series try to go beyond that by, marketing themselves as somewhat of a premium product. I'm not entirely sure they've succeeded that way. When I did an interview very recently with the rum champion and Wes Bergen on how to taste rums, the subject of Indian rums came up, and Wes quite correctly said, this is just sweetened, adulterated crap, and he just doesn't like it at all, and it just isn't one of his favorite rums, and I completely understand that. I do, however, want to make the point that to some extent, as I taste more and more low-class rums from all over the place, and I use the word carefully, um, I can't entirely discount cultural factors in how rums are made in the countries of origin. And if, for example, in India, we have a situation where rums are marketed to as spirits to the population which doesn't have a lot of money to spend on it, then they are going to go for the lowest common denominator. And the whole point, of course, is to sell. It's no accident that even in the West, we see spice rums selling like crazy, while the really upscale stuff that costs a little bit more tends to languish on the shelves all the time. It's exactly the same thing, but multiplied in India. Now, one of the reasons we don't see rums from India very often in the West is largely because they've got so much custom within their own country that there's very little financial incentive for them to try and bump up the quality and sell it out West. I mean, they would have to do things like do tests to say what the purity is. They would have to do extras, to show how they make it. And then a whole bunch of disclosure issues would start to come up. And this is something that probably is seen as just not something they want to do. More to the point, of course, there's a whole bunch of regulations out west which they're going to have to adhere to, which may not be the same in the regulatory climate of India. So basically, these are local rums that continue to sell really well over there and in the east, but they don't come up for consideration very often in the west. That, however, does not make them entirely bad rums. Now, with this one in particular, we're talking about a rum that we know very little about. It is entirely possible that it's not actually made from molasses directly. It may actually be made from jaggery. We don't know. Has it been spiced? Has it been added to? We don't know. The only way to really check this out is when we actually taste it ourselves, run it through hydrometer tests and what have you. Now, the little bit I know about this is that it is a column still spirit. They have added caramel to it to darken the color. I mean, just look at that color, right? I mean, it really is actually kind of darker than you would expect for a rum that apparently is about 2 to 3 years old. There are very few rums that like that out there that are going to aspire to premium status, and certainly this one doesn't, however much it sells throughout the world. But having said that, what's it like? Well, let's take a taste. Well, when you smell it, it's certainly sweet. It smells that way. It has some fruits in it, so a little bit of molasses, caramel, toffee, blancmange, all the standard rum tastes, as well as a fair bit of vanilla, which I think is just a bit excessive. And that, of course, leads to all the usual questions. Now, it is bottled at 42.8%. And 42.8% is the old British imperial system of 75 proof, which seems to be a standard in India that they've never entirely abandoned. You don't see 40% except perhaps from Amrut on their export market, and you don't actually see very much stronger than that. At least I've never found any. There may be locally. But it does smell quite interesting. It smells reasonably nice. You can tell why it's quite popular. And if you taste it, that's where things start to come unstuck for me. For one thing, it's actually quite thin. There is really not a whole lot to say about it. It's got a bit of salt. There's a little bit of caramel. There's some basic flavors of dark fruits. Again, the caramel, the blancmange, the toffee, all the stuff that comes from a barrel aging. Except, of course, we don't know which kinds of barrels they age it in at all. The real problem with it is the mouthfeel, as well as those spices that you kind of are hinted at without being driven home by a bludgeon. I'm not entirely enthused by the whole thing. It tastes like a rum for sure, but it does have that sort of slight taste to it that doesn't quite gel with the sort of thing that we want to see in a true rum. On the other hand, you could equally argue that this is something unique to India and this is sort of a representation of their terroir. But again, without the disclosure that you get from the company, you really can't make an accurate assessment of what it is. So on that basis, I think as a rum and coke, this thing could do really well. I think as a sipper, it's kind of okay. It's too weak to really make a statement for itself. It has enough taste to be happy hour for anybody who wants to try it. I mean, I would. I mean, you could get drunk on it in no time flat, of course, but the truth is that there really isn't very much to say about it. And at best, I would score it 8. And you know what? I'm going to take off a point just for lack of disclosure and call it 7 to 9, which is for me kind of like a rum that aspires to be something better, but isn't anywhere close to it. The thing about it for me, though, at the end of the day, is that it really doesn't taste serious. Now, this is a word that a blogger friend of mine who got me into the video thing, likes to refer to as something that people who talk a lot but don't actually produce a lot, or come up, they don't talk, they talk the talk without walking the walk, so to speak. It's that kind of thing. It's good enough without actually aspiring to anything greater. And I think that may be its great failing. Sure, it's absolutely popular, and sure, you're going to love it if you drink it enough. But there's so much better out there that one is left asking, why bother? So 79 points. It's a decent enough rum for what it is. It is representative of India. Is it a key rum of the world? Not to me, it's not. I think Old Monk still kind of has the chops for that. And until they start to get their disclosure requirements up to scratch and start actually telling us what it is that we're drinking, I'm not going to say you should pass on it, but if there's stuff at the same price point out there, you'll be probably better off getting that one. That's it for today, and we are going to look at other Indian rums in the future. I've still got quite a few to go through. And for the moment, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any comments, please leave them. Otherwise, take care, everybody, and have a good day. Bye-bye.